It didn't begin in Washington or New Delhi. It began in the quiet of an early morning as the first rays of sunlight touched the streets of Mumbai, while the markets of London and New York were still asleep. Traders poured coffee into paper cups, expecting another routine day. And then a single headline flashed across the ticker. Burkina Faso signs 14 billion grain deal with India. For a moment, the financial world froze. Burkina Faso, a small, landlocked nation in West Africa, long associated with gold, cotton, and endless political struggles, had suddenly stepped onto the world stage, not as a victim of aid, not as a forgotten headline, but as a supplier of life itself. Food. 20 million metric tons of maize and sorghum pledged over 10 years. No speeches, no slogans, just 3 paragraphs of cold, simple numbers. And yet those numbers hit harder than any political declaration. Within minutes, grain prices spiked in Chicago and Mumbai. Analysts rushed to live television, calling it a historic shift, a game changer. South America and Eastern Europe, long dominant in feeding Asia, felt a chill down their spines. Out of nowhere, Burkina Faso, a country without a coastline, had claimed a seat in the global food order. But this was about more than trade. It was about power, resilience, and the rewriting of Africa's story. Why would India, a grain giant, already rich in wheat and rice, sign such a massive deal with a country once dismissed as too poor, too unstable, too far from the sea? The answer lay in a single word: vulnerability. India's food system depends on the monsoon. When the rains are good, warehouses overflow. When they fail, shelves empty and prices soar. Over 1 billion people live under that shadow. Burkina Faso offered something India could not ignore: climate diversity. A bad year in South Asia does not mean a bad year in West Africa. By linking harvests, India bought itself a safety net against uncertainty. For Burkina Faso, it was about something even deeper: identity. For decades, the nation had been reduced to clichés: landlocked, resource-poor, politically fragile. But by committing 20 million tons of grain over a decade, Burkina Faso declared to the world, "We are more than gold and cotton. We can feed the future." Skeptics were quick to pounce. Rivals sneered. Without a port, it's just fantasy. Consultants in Kiev called it reckless. Even some West African neighbors doubted convoys of grain could cross borders without chaos. But instead of retreating, Burkina Faso and India turned the weakness into strength. Rail lines to Ghana, Togo, and Côte d'Ivoire were upgraded. New silos rose near ports. Roads were paved. Infrastructure that had been neglected for decades suddenly came alive with investment. What once seemed impossible became the very foundation of cooperation. And that's why the world was stunned. This was no longer just about maize and sorghum. It was about a nation tearing down the very barriers that defined it. A landlocked country was building its own arteries to the sea. The reactions were fierce. South American farmers warned of a price war. Eastern Europe saw its dominance threatened. In New York and London, traders scrambled to factor Burkina Faso into models that had never once included it. And across Africa, something even more important happened: hope. Farmers in Mali and Senegal asked, if Burkina Faso can do it, why not us? For the first time, the impossible looked possible. Still, questions lingered. If Burkina Faso exports so much grain, will its own people have enough to eat? The government anticipated this. A percentage of every harvest was ring-fenced for domestic consumption. No matter how high global prices climbed, that share could not be touched. Revenues would fund irrigation, food subsidies, and storage, ensuring that the trains leaving for India would not leave Burkina Faso empty-handed at home. Politically, the implications were explosive. For decades, Burkina Faso's economy was tethered to Western aid and donors. Now it stood before the world as a partner, not a client. Choosing India, not Europe, not Washington, was a statement. Burkina Faso will decide its future on its own terms. In Bamako, Dakar, and Niamey, leaders began asking, if Ouagadougou can strike such a deal, why not us? But in Washington, Brussels, and London, policymakers read it differently. To them, this was a tremor proof that the old rules of Africa were breaking. For the United States, this symbolism was impossible to ignore. For Europe, it was a warning shot. And for China, long investing in African agriculture, it was a reminder that India was now playing the game too, and playing it well. In the villages of Burkina Faso, the shift was felt not in numbers, but in dignity. A farmer put it simply, they used to laugh at us. Now they need us. And that more than silos, more than contracts, more than dollars, is the real story. This deal is not only about grain. It is about a nation once dismissed as a footnote, now writing itself into the chapters of global history. Burkina Faso has stepped out of the margins, not as a beggar of aid, but as a broker of life. And the world is watching.